spilled salt.
If you'd asked me 6 months earlier whether I trusted my best friend with the parts of my life I'd sworn I'd never tell anyone, I'd have laughed and said, "Of course." I would have meant it. I would have been wrong. The thing about living in someone else's story is you don't notice until you're in the middle of the sentence and your mouth doesn't belong to you anymore. I moved to the city for exactly one reason: to stop being small. Small as in the boring job, the apartment that never heard laughter, the quiet family dinners where the same 3 topics were recycled until they weren't about anything at all. I wanted to be seen in ways that matched how loud my brain always felt. Writing for me felt like permission. That was how I met Maya. She lived 1 floor down in the walk-up, a whirlwind of thrift store jackets and lip gloss, and 3 different notebooks filled with scribbles. She had the kind of laugh that could knock over a glass if you let it. We bonded over bad coffee and better excuses for not going home on the weekends. Within weeks, she was my emergency contact, my person to text at 2 a.m., the only one who'd sit while I read a paragraph I was proud of and pretend it was the best thing she'd ever heard. We told each other everything, not in theatrical, slow reveal ways, more like I'd leave a sentence unfinished and she would finish it for me. She knew the scar on my knee from falling off a bicycle when I was 9. She knew the exact way I folded the laundry, too quickly. She knew my ex's disturbing collection of novelty mugs. She knew, with an intimacy that felt like daylight, the hurt in my childhood that I'd learned to tuck into tidy boxes. She also knew I wanted to get better at telling those stories. "Let me read something," she'd say. "We can workshop it." And she'd say it like we were co-conspirators, which we were, up until the point when conspiracies have victims. Her side hustle began as a quiet thing. She would set up in the corner of the coffee shop with earphones in and record herself reading. Not her voice exactly. She called it a voice for stories. At first, I thought it was performance practice. She'd send me the files and I'd give feedback. "Slow down here," I'd write. "Make the line about the stairs land harder." She'd take it, tweak it, claim she felt ridiculous. And then suddenly she'd have a dozen small listeners who DM'd her little notes like religious text. Then the channel popped up. She called it something catchy, a name that made you feel like you'd accidentally walked into the confessional booth of the internet. Anonymous Confessions read first person. The idea was simple and wild. Take small raw moments that happen to regular people and tell them in the first person, so the listener felt like they were sitting in the narrator's skin. The production was bare bones, her voice, a minimal beat, a crackle of ambient noise. But her editing was surgical. She knew where to cut, when to breathe, when to leave a stretch of silence that made your heart do something weird. At first, I was thrilled. She asked me to read something. One of my short pieces about a bad summer in a small town, about a prom dress that didn't fit and a boy who lied a lot. She told me she wanted my piece for an episode. It fits the theme. We need the truth in there. I thought we were building something together. She promised attribution, small text on the description, a quiet story by in the credits. That felt enough. A person with a platform could do that, right? Honor, credit, respect. I thought yes. When the episode released, the comments were an immediate glow. People said they felt like the narrator was sitting next to them, that they cried in the grocery aisle. A DM appeared in my inbox from someone who said the story had helped them feel less alone about something they hadn't told anyone. I felt like I had done exactly what I wanted. Reached someone. But then I saw the thumbnail. It had my real name. Not the pen name I used on small writing forums. Not the careful privacy I'd tried to keep. My actual, oddly spelled, always misspelled name. And more than that, the episode description had details I hadn't shared anywhere public. The town, the exact architecture of the high school gym, the brand of the prom dress. Little specifics that only lived in the notebook I kept under my mattress. I clicked through the comments, and there was Maya's reply to someone asking for more. She shared this with me late one night while we were drunk on bad wine. She insisted I share it anonymously, but wanted her real name in the post because she's trying to build a portfolio. My heart dropped into my shoes. My chest felt like someone had placed a fist there and was slowly squeezing. I messaged her immediately. "Why did you use my name?" I typed. I put 3 question marks in. as if punctuation could convey the way my limbs had gone hollow. Her reply was immediate and casual. Babe, you said you wanted your portfolio built. You told me to help. It was a good EP. Number 3 trending in the storytelling tag. You said anonymously me. I wrote, you promised attribution, not that. She sent me a voice note. I used your name because you wanted people to connect with the authenticity of it, she said. Her tone was light, like she was telling me about a quirky rental she'd found. I mean, of course I asked. You said yes, don't be dramatic. I replayed the voice note until the edges of the audio blurred. Then I dug through old messages and found the thread. There it was. If you ever use that piece, I want the credit. It's mine. Promise. I'd said that in a night of strategically induced courage, after 3 glasses of wine and one very sincere pep talk from her. I had meant, in that soft, moonlit way, that I wanted my writing to have a name attached when it was out trying to find readers. I didn't mean I wanted my trauma broadcast under my real name, where people could trace it back to me like a breadcrumb trail. Okay, I wrote. Okay, but you need to change it, please. I can't take it down, she said. It already got picked up. Besides, you said you wanted to be known. This is known. Known! The word tasted like metallic pennies. I had wanted to be known for my art, not for having lived through something other people could file under content. I tried to breathe through it. I tried to see the math. If her channel grew, the story would reach more people. If it reached people, maybe doors would open. I told myself stories about trade-offs in exposure, rationales I would later recognize as the same scripts people recite to numb guilt. I started to notice patterns, more episodes that had details from late-night conversations, the bit about the landlord who hid Christmas lights in the closet, the anecdote about the bar that served pretzels shaped like hearts, tiny, seemingly benign things that I would only have said to Maya. I asked her about them. We archive conversations, she said, for authenticity. People like when it's real. You're always messy and good at the truth. That sentence landed like a pebble in a still pond and made ripples I couldn't stop watching. People began tagging me on social posts where strangers discussed that line about stairs. A listener recognized the voice of the kid who used to sell candy at the high school football games. My high school. Another found my hometown cousin on Facebook and sent her the episode. Texts started showing up from numbers I didn't have saved. Is this you? I think I know you. I grew up with that teacher. My parents called. Is this about the time you... They asked, and their voices were small and bewildered. Privacy, a fragile thing, was splitting like thin ice underfoot. I felt the edges of my life spooling out, and no part of me could pull the loose threads back in. Then the offer arrived. It came in the form of an email with polite corporate language and a logo I'd seen on things that felt official. It was from an indie production company that scouted internet storytelling channels for adaptation. They wanted to option a series of short first-person episodes based on real experiences. They asked for permission to use existing content and said they preferred episodes with named authors because it made marketing simpler. They asked Maya if she could provide contact info for any contributors who might want to be involved. When Maya forwarded me the email, her tone was electric. We could be TV, she wrote. We could actually be TV. Optioning felt like the future. It felt like everything I'd ever wanted condensed into a single PDF. I started telling my friends. Excited, shaking, the way you tell someone you've won something before you've counted the cost. But the more I thought about it, the more my stomach hurt. In the option contract, the language was broad. Rights to all stories as presented on the platform, it read. Perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide. It meant that if the production company turned a story into a short film or a dramatized series, they could use it however they wanted. That included selling the life rights of the person whose story it was. I asked Maya, did you tell them which episodes you used real names for? She responded with a single blue checkmark on our chat, and then a long explanation. They want human connection, babe. Having names makes it easier to get people to relate. You were part of this from the start. I tried to imagine what it would be like to see my life, the jagged edges of it, smoothed and lit and curated by a crew I'd never met. I thought about my mother's face when she saw our house on a screen. I thought about the man I dated at 22. Would he recognize himself? Would he care? Would he have any rights here? I tried to picture who would profit from the telling. You can opt out, Maya said finally, as if she could sense the chain of questions forming in my head. Say no or say yes. Either way, it's a huge opportunity. Saying no meant accepting the fallout of calling out the very person I'd leaned on. Saying yes meant my private life could become someone else's commodity. I said no. I wrote an email to the production company. I explained that one of the episodes included personal details belonging to me, and that I did not consent to the adaptation of that story. I asked them to exclude it from any option, or to contact me personally before moving forward. I was formal and shaky, and used the kind of lawyerly cadence I'd only ever seen in TV shows. They wrote back with corporate kindness. We will review. Later they wrote, we appreciate your concerns. However, the episodes were submitted by the channel as published content. We will proceed in accordance with the publisher's rights. In other words, we can. You can't. When I confronted Maya with the production company's reply, she was quiet for a beat and then defensive. What did you expect? They produce content. You want your art to be seen, right? Don't be petty. Petty. The word shoved its elbow into my ribs. She framed me as jealous and small for asking basic human kindness. To be credited, respected. She made it sound like my refusal was a dramatic plot twist in her rise rather than the hinge for someone's future. She told mutual friends I was being difficult with a partner who was helping me. Small cracks showed up in other places. Friends who had been comfortable in the shadow of our shared apartment rearranged themselves. The girl from the floor above, who used to borrow sugar and stay late for our impromptu writing nights, began to avoid sitting near me in the laundry room. People asked me if I'd read the episode and liked it. Don't you want exposure? They said, like it was a favor I'd chosen to refuse. Then the hate arrived. It was a drip at first, a stranger calling me selfish in comments, another accusing me of lying about the story to get attention. I tried to ignore it, but the comments multiplied into a feed, then into screenshots people sent me, then into text messages. Someone dug for an old lived journal from when I was 19 and found a painful, angsty entry I'd written one night about feeling like I didn't belong in the world. They posted parts of it. People treated my vulnerability like a loophole. I felt like I was standing in a glass room and everyone was allowed to throw stones through the windows. Maya's replies to those comments were a masterclass in deflection. She's being dramatic, she typed, but I've always had to protect my work. She recast the story as an example of me finding my voice. The narrative slotted into place. I was difficult, fragile, obstructive. She was the entrepreneurial genius building something bigger than us. I tried to speak up publicly, to write a thread explaining my side. I typed, deleted, typed again. Words on the internet are merciless. Once you open the door, people will walk in and make themselves at home. I hit post. A handful of friends liked it. A few people sent supportive DMs. Half of her followers accused me of attention seeking. In the real world, in the nights after that, I lost my appetite. Little things became suspicious, the way a slight cough can make you think someone's hiding a knife. I stopped leaving my apartment at odd hours. I removed pictures from my social media, tightened the privacy of my profiles. Fear was not a single big thing. It was granular, 1,000 tiny constraints I added to try to keep my life contained. I thought sometimes of legal action. You can find attorneys for almost anything online, but the cost in time and money and image was enormous. Who wins in a fight like that? People like Maya, who built brands on other people's edges, know the system is tired and tips toward the person who writes the narrative first. The breaking point was not cinematic. There was no scene with raised voices and a slammed door. Instead, it came in a DM from a woman I didn't know who called herself Anna. Your piece about prom, she wrote. I was the girl you danced with. You made her the villain. She's in my DMs asking why you made her sound so cruel. It wasn't like that. You changed the order of events. My breath left my body. I read the message again. I had written the piece like an obituary for a version of myself. My memory had been a jagged thing. Memory does that. It edits. When Maya's team cut and rearranged the audio for rhythm, they had made choices about whose fault things were. They had used me in a mosaic that, in the end, told a version of truth that pinballed away from the people who had lived it. Anna sent a screenshot of the episode's transcript with my name in the byline and a line I'd never written. "You portrayed me as cruel, and it ruined my job interview," she typed. "I cried in my car the other day because someone asked me about you." I sat on the floor, my forehead against the cool of the coffee table. I thought of all the people who had been extras in my life, the barista who gave me terrible advice, the ex who'd once said something stupid, and how easily the narrative could be a weapon against them. I contacted Maya and asked for a meeting. She came over with a bag of sugarless gum and the sort of look people get when they are about to explain a minor inconvenience, like the weather had decided to be rude. "This is messy," she said, "but it's exposure." She put a hand on my knee. "You're overreacting." "You used my life to make money." I said it like a flat fact. "That's not how it is," she said. Then she said something that felt like a blade. "If you loved your own art, you would be glad it's getting out there." Love became the new cloak for exploitation. If I loved my work, I had to surrender my privacy, my context, my right to say no. There was a weekend I considered leaving the city. I pictured packing my notebooks into a box and moving to a place with one coffee shop and two stoplights, someplace where people didn't know how to find you on the internet. But the thought of shrinking back to the person I had tried so hard not to be put me into a different kind of panic. I had come here to be big in the honest way, to speak loudly and be seen. Running felt like surrender. Instead, I did something small and stubborn. I started writing again. Not for a channel, not for a producer, but for myself. I wrote my version of the prom night, not to correct the record so much as to reclaim the sentences. I wrote badly at first. The words were clumsy laces that had to be untangled. Then they found muscle. I sent it to an editor friend who agreed to publish it as a personal essay under a different name. It wasn't viral. It did not make cable. But people wrote to me. They sent me messages from the scanner of human life. I saw myself in this. My mom used to. I thought I was the only one. Those messages were modest and warm and not performative. They reminded me there was an audience that didn't want to monetize my pain. They wanted to meet it and maybe sit there with it for a little while. The production company moved forward with the option. They adapted other stories from the channel into short vignettes. My episode was edited into a montage and used as inspiration for a character that shared a name with me. I watched a version of my life play in amber across a screen and felt both nauseous and strangely detached, like seeing a ghost of yourself wearing your face. Maya texted me, triumphant. "They used it," she said. "Credits to you in the show notes." They listed me as a contributor, a small line buried in the show's website. It didn't have my name in huge lights. It didn't come with a plate of apology. It came with an inevitability. The world moves on. People are quick to forgive the person who hands them a good story. In the months that followed, the internet's attention shifted like light on water. New channels, new controversies, new hashtags. Maya's subscriber count grew. She got brand deals, a small studio desk, the kind of photography that makes influencers look like they live on a perpetual island. I congratulated her once in a text and meant it with all the complicated affection left inside me. She replied with a heart emoji and a string of high-fiving gifs. Sometimes I wonder if she ever felt bad, if she stayed up at night and listened to the recordings the way I did and felt named shame. I don't know, because people like Maya are masters of the narrative. They make themselves both protagonist and victim in the same breath. When the world loves you, you can justify almost anything. I did not win a grand jury decision. I did not get an apology with the weight of restitution. What I did get, slowly, was a voice that belonged only to me. I found a small collective that collaborated on honest pieces, not curated for virality, but for truth. I taught workshops for people who wanted to tell their stories without handing them to someone else on terms that favored someone else's future. The scariest part of the whole thing was the way my boundaries had been porous without me noticing. I think that's true for a lot of us. We trade pieces of ourselves for applause, for convenience, for a sense that we're not alone. Sometimes the cost is learning the hard way what it means to say no, and then to mean it. 2 years after the episode, I ran into Anna at a bookstore reading. She had invited me over after one of my workshops. We talked about how memory can be a treacherous editor. She told me the job she'd lost after the episode had been the worst kind of luck, a small, meaningful position she loved. They'd found a reason to let her go, and it stung. She had forgiven me, eventually, but the scar was still tender. "I don't think you knew," she said. "When you wrote it, you didn't mean to hurt. But then someone took it and made it a different thing." "I know," I said. "I know now." We both laughed. Not the loud, freeing kind, but the kind you make when you are 5 minutes from crying and you want to spare yourself the spectacle. "People want stories that are easy to digest," she said. "Truth is messy. Messy isn't usually a good thumbnail." She was right. And it was the most uncomfortably honest observation I'd heard all year. I still think about Maya sometimes. I think about how easy it was to hand over pieces of myself to someone I loved, because love makes you soft in the exact spots where you should be blunt. I think about the weird economics of empathy on the internet, how voyeurism is dressed up as connection and sold back to us as catharsis. But here's what I learned that has stayed with me the longest. Your stories are yours until you choose to sell them. That doesn't mean you can never share or collaborate. It just means you deserve to negotiate, to say how you're represented, where your name appears, how your life is used. People will try to normalize the erosion of that power. They'll stroke your ego and offer you a byline in exchange. They'll call your boundaries petty. If someone tells you that the price of being known is giving up the right to say no, they are asking you to sign away your voice. People will read your pieces and they will see themselves. They will also see the parts other people wrote for you. That's confusing. But you can always write again. You can always reclaim the narrative line by line until you find a version of your life you can live with. When I stand at a podium now, talking to a small room about the ethics of storytelling, I tell them the obvious because the obvious is where we get sloppy. I tell them to document consent, to get it in writing. I tell them that friends are not always custodians of your truth, and you should treat your own stories like valuables. Because they are. People nod, they take notes. A woman in the back raises her hand and says, "But what if the person holding my story is also my friend? What then?" I look at her and tell the truth. "Then the answer is harder," I say. You sit them down. You tell them you're not okay with the ways they want to tell it. You say no. If they push, you leave. I don't pretend it's neat. I don't pretend it doesn't hurt. But I tell them that you only get to decide how your life is used if you choose to. A few years on, I still get tagged in posts that link back to that episode. Sometimes people write to apologize for the harm it caused. Sometimes there are people who still say, "That story changed my life." Both of those are true. People are messy, and so are their impacts. The other night, I read a new piece at a small underground mic. It was about a bicycle, a scar, and the way a 16-year-old's bravado looks so much like courage from far away. The room was full of strangers. They listened like it was the end of the world, quiet and awful and tender. When I finished, someone stood up and clapped. A woman I didn't know came up and hugged me and said, "Thank you. I felt less alone." I thought of Maya, of the career she built, of the small, expensive lessons I paid for. I also thought of how that person in the crowd had no idea the backstory of publication wars or options and credits. To them, the story was just what it was, a lifeline. And maybe that's the purest thing about stories. They can rescue us whether or not they're told perfectly. That doesn't mean we should let the rescue be a ransom. So if you ever consider handing a piece of yourself to someone who says they can make it shine, ask them one simple question. What do you intend to do with it? Then listen to the answer. If the answer starts with, "It'll be great exposure," put the file away for a night. Sleep on it. Your life deserves more than a tagline. And if you already, like me, have a story that someone else made money from, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to say, "That was mine." It's okay to write it again and make sure this time the sentences belong only to you.